We are in Numbers chapter 16 tonight. Numbers chapter 16. From Exodus chapter 19 to Numbers chapter 10, verse 11, the nation of Israel was hanging out with the Lord and learning about him, hearing his word, being given his laws, being instructed in what to build in order to have a worship system where they could have a meeting with the Lord on a regular basis. And then beginning at Numbers chapter 10, verse 11, we saw the nation begin to move. And so they go from learning about God to attempting to walk with God. And as we have been uncovering in our studies, it wasn't very pretty. Not at all. It got very ugly at times. It just seemed like failure after failure after failure. And in Numbers chapter 14, the Lord had sentenced the nation of Israel to an additional 40 years of wandering in the desert because of their rebellion and disobedience, their lack of faith. And you would think that from Numbers chapter 14 through the end of the book, that's what we would be studying, because after all, there's 35 chapters in this book, the book of Numbers. That's just not the case, is it? If you're familiar with the study of the book of Numbers, you know that the desert wanderings of the nation of Israel for those 40 years are recorded in chapter 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. And that's it. Just a handful of chapters to record 40 years of history in the desert for the nation of Israel. And you might wonder why that is. Why so much attention on things like conversations with the Lord where he's giving them instructions? Why do we get so few details about a huge, massive chunk of Israel's history? 40 years of history. And the answer to that would be a simple: there just wasn't much to write about. There just wasn't a whole lot happening during those 40 years, because for those 40 years, they were serving out a sentence for disobedience against God, rebellion against God. Instead of going into the promised land, they were just turning circles in the hot desert sun. And so there's not a whole lot to write about. And a similar thing can be found with the Christian who comes to a knowledge of Christ and never really progresses, never really grows in their faith of the Lord. They don't really ever do what they have claimed to do in their salvation, and that is put their full trust on the Lord, live for him, and walk with him. And so as we look at the types that are laid out for us in the book of Numbers, what we really see there for us as New Testament Christians is that when you don't come into the land of promise, which for us would represent the Spirit-filled life, then sad to say, very unfortunate to say, there's just not a whole lot of good things that's going to be written about you. You're not going anywhere with the Lord. And the only things that really matter on this earth are things that have lasting, eternal value. So if you're, as a Christian, living a very carnal life, a very materialistic, centered life, then there's really not going to be a whole lot to say about your life. I used to joke on a regular basis and tell people around me, life stinks and then you die. Of course, I was joking. I know that was pretty poor humor. You all are witnesses as to how well my humor has matured over the years. You get to hear proof of that week in and week out. Poor humor, but if we're talking about eternal things, and we're talking about a person that does not have a relationship with the Lord, regardless of their profession, then sad to say that really is the case even for them. Life stinks. You're living without the Lord. You're not a man or woman of faith. You're not going anywhere as far as eternity is concerned. Life stinks, and then you die, and then that's when things get really bad. They go from bad to worse, because now you do have to answer the issue of eternity. So we do get some big events that pop out of the 40 years of desert wandering for Israel. Unfortunately, with the exception of chapter 15, they're all negative. Chapter 15 is about the most positive thing that you are going to see come out of that 40 years of desert wandering, and it seems that it happened right away, and that was the Lord, essentially, if you read between the lines, essentially giving the future generation of Israel promises for the future, promises that he would come through on for them. And then even for the older generation that had squandered away their opportunity at living in the promised land, it was even a restoration of sorts to them, wasn't it? It was the Lord saying, hey, you can still bring sacrifices. You can still worship me. You can still know me. You've locked yourself out because of your doubt, because of your refusal to go into the promised land. You've locked yourself out of the promised land, but that doesn't mean I'm done with you. That doesn't mean I don't have mercy for you. It doesn't mean that I don't want to still have a relationship with you. So tonight, chapter 16, we begin a rather ugly story, a big event that's recorded for us. And the reason it's recorded for us as this big event is because it's such a disaster of epic proportions for the nation of Israel. So let's begin reading at verse 1. Now Korah, the son of Izhar, son of Kohath, son of Levi, and Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men, and we'll continue in verse 2 in just a second. I want to point out that Korah was a son of Kohath. And the interpretation of that would be, he does have an assignment in tabernacle service. He's not a priest. He is a son of Kohath, which means he is a Levitical worker. He does the physical work of ministry. And from previous studies, perhaps you remember that Kohath was the tribe that was assigned to carry the holiest of furnishings there when the tabernacle was moved. So you had those furnishings like the brazen altar, the brass laver, the table of showbread, the lampstand, the altar of incense, a.k.a. the golden altar, and then, of course, the Ark of the Covenant. That was the duty assigned to the Kohathites. That's what this guy, Korah, gets to do for the Lord. But as you're going to see, he is frustrated because that position that was assigned to him by God is not good enough for him. He wants a position that is bigger and better than that, and really what he has his sights on is Aaron's position, or if nothing else, a position as an actual priest doing the spiritual work of ministry. And I think his case is this: I am a son of Levi. I'm a descendant of Levi. And that's all that Aaron is. Aaron is nothing more than a descendant of Levi. So why does Aaron and his line, why do they get to be the priests and the high priests of the nation when me and my family and my line, because we're in a different family that descended from Levi, we don't get to do any of that. We get stuck with the physical work, the grunt work. We have to carry stuff. We have to move stuff. Why can't I have a better position? And he's not alone in this attempt to overthrow Moses and Aaron. He has three co-conspirators here, and that would be Dathan, Abiram, and On. And I'm not sure what their beef is, but they were on a mission to off Moses and Aaron. We know what Korah's intentions are. We don't really for sure know the intentions of the other three and what motivated them. They were sons of Reuben, so perhaps they were more interested in gunning for Moses' authority, because their argument could be, hey, we are descendants of Reuben. Reuben is the firstborn of Jacob. We should do this in order of precedence. It should be that the oldest tribe, the oldest child of Jacob, produces the leaders for the nation. Moses, you're not from the first tribe. You're not from Reuben. You're from Levi. But that doesn't matter to the Lord because that's not how the Lord calls shots when it comes to assigning ministry. The Lord assigns ministry based on his own purposes. The New Testament writer Paul reminds us that the Lord sets each one in the church as he sees fit. Divine perspective, whether you like it or not, God picks who does what in the church. It's not by who is there the longest. It's not by who is the oldest. It doesn't go by precedence. It doesn't go by birth order. It goes by God's goodwill and intentions. He knows who to appoint, and he knows why he's appointing that person. We may never know. You may scratch your head over that every week. Why is Arlyn the pastor? I do too. I scratch my head over that pretty much every week. I tell Maggie all the time, why am I the one doing this? I have those moments where reality hits me, and I'm like, I can't believe the Lord has me doing this. I know me. I wouldn't have picked me. I would have picked this person or that person. Doesn't matter. The Lord has his reasons, and he's always right, and that bears itself out story after story, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, as we see the kind of character that Moses had and why, even to us, we understand the wisdom of God in selecting Moses. Verse 2. So it wasn't just Korah. It wasn't just Korah and these three other guys, these sons or descendants of Reuben, but verse 1 told us they took men, and verse 2 tells us just how many men they took. Verse 2, and they rose up before Moses with the number of the people of Israel, 250 chiefs of the congregation chosen from the assembly, well-known men. And I just got to say, Korah, well played. Well played. Brilliant strategy. If it's Korah and three other guys, they have no chance at overthrowing Moses and Aaron. No chance. But if it's Korah and these three other men, and then they're able to convince and persuade craftily and slyly 250 leaders among the nation, and not just leaders, but leaders who were of renown, well-respected leaders within the nation. Now you've got a situation where the odds are heavily stacked against Moses and Aaron, and so the whole script flips. Now it's no longer they have no chance against Moses and Aaron. Now it is, if God does not intervene, Moses and Aaron have no chance at this. There's going to be a complete overhaul of leadership, and pretty much Korah is going to be calling the shots and the rest of these people following him. Brilliant plan from a human perspective. And we understand why this is such an effective plan. If you've got leaders that you respect and that you think highly of, and you hear what their scriptural and spiritual positions are, you're tempted to say, well, there's no reason for me to reason. There's no reason for me to even spend any time thinking about this. If my leader takes this position, there's got to be a good reason. I respect that leader, so I'm going to take that position too. So you have 250 leaders within the nation, and what's that going to do? These well-respected leaders are going to talk, and the congregation, here's what they're going to do. Our tribal leader, our clan leader, our immediate leader believes that Korah's argument against Moses and Aaron is legitimate, and if our leader believes that, then Korah must be right about what he is saying about Moses and Aaron. So by the droves, people would hop on board. A brilliant setup indeed, but the Lord is, of course, going to intervene and make it impossible for this overthrow to succeed. Verse 3, they assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. Now, mainly, I will tell you this, this attempted overthrow is centered on Aaron. Now, they have to come after Moses because Moses is in the way. He's the guy that the Lord spoke through and called Aaron and his line to the line of work that the Lord did. So on top of that, you got Moses supporting Aaron, and so he's in the way. You've got to come at Moses too. But as you'll see in this chapter, mainly what these folks are after, Korah certainly, is Aaron's position and Aaron's authority as the tribe that establishes the priestly line for the tabernacle. The root of every sin is rebellion against God's order of authority. That's like a definition of sin. What is sin? It's not doing things the Lord's way. The original sin was what? We could say pride in the heart of Lucifer, but the original sin was pride and then rebellion against God's order of authority. In the book of Jude, this passage from Numbers 16 is referenced, and here's what Jude says about it. This is chapter 1, verse 11, because there's only one chapter in Jude. And it says, "Woe to them, for they walked in the way of Cain and abandoned themselves for the sake of gain to Balaam's error and perished in Korah's rebellion." Now, if you weren't an Old Testament scholar and you weren't well versed on Numbers chapter 16, you might assume that what Jude is referring to there with Korah's rebellion is rebellion in general, but that's not the case. It's not just rebellion in general. It's a specific kind of rebellion that is being spoken about. It is a rebellion against God-established authority. It's a rebellion against God-established order within his kingdom. And that is no small thing in the New Testament. I don't have to tell you it's no small thing in the Old Testament. You're going to see how big of a deal it is in the Old Testament. But just because we're living under the dispensation of grace, that doesn't mean it's a little matter when people try to overthrow God-appointed leadership in the New Testament church. It is a big deal. And just because the Lord doesn't always act as swiftly in judgment as he will in this chapter with Korah and his clan, don't think that God won't overthrow those overthrow attempts. He will. In the New Testament era, I think it takes more time. But when there is an attempt at an overthrow of God-appointed leadership or an attempt to split a church right down the middle, you can pretty much sit back and watch this play out, and you can pretty much figure out whose side the Lord was on. Because you'll see that split. You'll see that dissension from the rest of the Orthodox group. You'll see that group just slowly peter out and fade away. That's generally what happens. I love to see that. I love to see when those groups just come to an end and I can say, well done, Lord. Well done. Well done. I don't know if you've ever been a part of a church where there was an overthrow of church leadership, or you've been a part of a church that went through a church split. If you have, raise your hand. All right, wow, a lot of people, right? And if that's you, I want to say, I feel that. I relate to that. I went through that with most of you. We've been through that. It is a painful thing, a very destructive thing. If you've never been through that, I want to say, God bless you. God bless you. I hope you never do have to experience that. Because these kind of things, these attempts at overthrow of God's appointed leadership, these attempts to split churches down the middle, they set brother against brother. Excuse me. They set brother against brother, sister against sister, kids against parents, friends against friends. And sometimes the people that experience that kind of destructiveness in a church never recover from it. They can never get rid of that pain. They never heal from it. Now, it's not the Lord's fault. It's because they won't let the Lord heal that. They won't let go of the bitterness that sets in from things like that. But this is a destructive thing anytime that you see it happen. And once we're finished with this story, if we're able to get through the story that I have sectioned off for us tonight, I want you to think about the pieces that remain when this is all done. Because once this attempt is made and the Lord overthrows it, he's going to pick up the pieces, and I want you to think about those pieces. I want you to think about those details that we aren't going to read about, like what this did to the hearts of the nation, how they felt to have to see this, to have to go through this, to have to lose friends and family members to God's judgment, and how painful that would be. Just think that over as we go through this. I think it's almost universally true that just about any time you see a movement like this to overthrow leadership or split a church, you can almost always trace it back to one person's selfish ambition. You can do that in Numbers chapter 16. You'll see that. It is very apparent. Korah is leading this charge, and the rest of the people are on board. And almost every time this happens, you can trace the root of the problem back to the selfish ambition of one person. It's true, you're going to have a lot of people that go along with that person, and they'll be sincere in their hearts. They will be deceived and not know it. There's a genuineness there. Sometimes there are even noble reasons why they go with the person that has attempted an overthrow. But you can almost always trace that back to that one person with selfish ambition. Paul said in Philippians chapter 2, verse 3, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. And James says this in James chapter 3, verses 14 through 16, but if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. You're going to see that demonstrated to a T in this chapter by Korah and his crew. Reading on in verse 3. And said to them, this is Korah and the group speaking to Moses and Aaron. They said to them, you have gone too far, for all in the congregation are holy, every one of them. Now, if this wasn't such a serious statement, it would be laughable for this guy to say this. I can't even in good conscience say this about anchored fellowship, and that's simply because I don't know your hearts like the Lord does. I'd love to be able to say this. Every one of us in this church, we are holy, every single one of us. But I can't say that because I don't know your hearts. But this guy, Korah, he has no trouble getting out his broad brush and stroking it across the whole nation and saying, all of these people, all 3 million of them, perfectly holy. Every one of them, perfectly holy. Now, of course, this isn't true. Of course, it's not true. But even if it were, I just want to let you know, it doesn't matter a bit. It doesn't matter a bit because this argument is absolutely invalid here. What he's doing is he's gunning for a position, and his argument is this: you guys aren't the only holy people in the nation. The rest of us are just as holy. But I would remind you, God's selections are according to his will and according to his purposes. And it's not a competition about who is more holy. It's not like whoever wins this month's Holiness of the Month award, they get to be the pastor. I mean, that's crazy, you know? Like, this month's award goes to Barry Sr. He surpassed Pastor Arlyn in holiness this month, so he gets to serve as pastor for the month of April. And I would say, you better get working on those Easter sermons, buddy. These things don't matter to the Lord. Now, holiness, of course, is going to be involved, but it's not a competition about who's more holy, and whoever is more holy, that's the person that gets to lead. This is about God picking people for his reasons, for his purposes, and God's choices are always right. Reading on in verse 3, he goes on to say, not only are all of these 3 million people perfectly holy, but the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourself above the assembly of the Lord? So these are all false accusations against Moses, of course. Accusation number 1, you've gone too far. As the New King James Version says, you've taken too much on yourself. You're overstepping your bounds by assuming the position that you have taken. He goes on to say, why do you exalt yourself? These are false accusations. They don't know Moses at all. That's very clear. If they knew Moses, or if they were there for Exodus chapter 3, when the Lord called Moses to be the guy, they would know that Moses tried everything to get the Lord to change his mind. He gave the Lord all kinds of excuses why he wouldn't be a good pick for that position. And when the Lord wasn't convinced, Moses finally resorted to this. Lord, okay, fine, whatever, but just pick someone else, please. Send by the hand of whoever you're going to send. Pick another guy. That was it. Moses did not want this position. God picked him against his initial will. And I might remind you that Moses has been trying to resign constantly. It seems like every month Moses is resigning and then the Lord is unresigning him. No, Moses, I can't let you resign. So Moses didn't want the position in the first place. He's been trying to resign on a somewhat frequent basis. And here these people are saying, man, you just are so full of yourself, setting yourself up in this position. God didn't pick you, Moses. You picked you, Moses. And we're tired of it. We want a change of guard. Verse 4, when Moses heard it, he fell on his face. He did a holy face plant. I told you before, early in our study through Exodus, that Moses is going to be really easy to recognize in heaven because he's the guy with the flat nose. You see the guy with the flat nose, go up to him and say, hi, Moses. That's Moses. He's got a flat nose because of how many times he face planted in the 5 books of Moses, Genesis through Deuteronomy. It was the bodily position of humility, of course, but also helplessness. It's I give up. There's nothing I can do here. It's humility, and it is a cry for help. And that is really the only position from which the Lord can exalt a person. Proverbs 13. Might have the wrong quote there. No, that's about sin. Never mind. That's about the way of the transgressor is hard. I don't know why I thought of that. But the Bible says somewhere in there, in one of those pages, on one of those chapters, that when you humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, he will exalt you. So you humble yourself. It's a good position to be in with the Lord. And when you feel helpless in a situation, take that to the Lord and let the Lord know, I'm helpless. I can't do this. I need your help. And then, of course, the Apostle Paul tells us in the New Testament, that's the kind of thing that the Lord can use and work through. It is in our weaknesses that his strength is made perfect in us. Verse 5, and he said to Korah and all his company, in the morning the Lord will show who is his and who is holy, and will bring him near to him. The one whom he chooses, he will bring near to him. Verse 6, do this, take censers, Korah and all his company, put fire in them and put incense on them before the Lord tomorrow, and the man whom the Lord chooses shall be the Holy One. You have gone too far, sons of Levi. I love this. They told Moses, Moses, you've gone too far. And Moses turns their argument right back on them, and he says, it's not me, it's you that has gone too far. Moses knows what's going to happen here. Why do you think Moses set up this little showcase of who's the Lord's choice? Why do you think he set this up like this, with the censers and putting the hot red coals on the censers and burning incense on the censers? Why do you think he picked this as the competition to showcase God's choice? He picked this because what does Korah want? Korah wants to be a priest. And so what does Moses do? He picks a priestly duty that the Lord was explicit about in Exodus chapter 30 and told the nation, no one else can do this. No one else can do this work but the priests. You can't burn incense unless you're a priest. Furthermore, in that chapter, Exodus 30, the Lord tells his people, I don't even want people who are not priests to take the ingredients and make the incense to burn at home for personal use. I don't even want that. This is a tabernacle proprietary blend. This is copyrighted and patented. This is only for the priests, and this is only for official purposes. And so Moses knows that when these guys who want to be priests get out there and try to be priests, what does he know is going to happen? Them fools are going to fry. The Lord is going to judge them because they are expressly doing what the Lord expressly commanded them not to. And you're going to see even Moses, he won't get near this. Moses, the leader of the nation, but that was off duty to Moses. That priestly stuff, like burning incense on the altar of incense, the golden altar, Moses wasn't allowed to do that. So Moses isn't going to be out there with the censer. He's going to be back at a distance watching these knuckleheads try to take this position from Aaron and his sons. Verse 8, and Moses said to Korah, hear now, you sons of Levi. Is it too small a thing for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do service in the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to minister to them? You see what Moses' point would be there? You guys get the most privileged responsibility of all the Levites. Korah, you get to be the group that goes in there and throws on your shoulder, bears the burden on your shoulder of the most holy tabernacle furnishings. Not just anyone gets to do that. That's a privilege, and that's not good enough for you. That's not good enough for you. You need to go for someone's position. You need to try to get yourself in a place that the Lord never called you to be. What is the best position for you in the church or in your spiritual life? The position that God appointed you to. Anything else is dangerous. I don't care how you seek a position that the Lord would not approve for you. You can do it kindly. You can do it, well, I'm just helping, just hopping in there and helping and doing what I can. And the whole time you're thinking, oh man, one day I'm pastor. One day I'm bass player. One day I'm elder. I'm going for that position and no one will know. Well, no matter how you do it, you're still coming up against the Lord and his divine order of authority, and you ought to be very, very careful about that. You should read this chapter before you consider staging that church coup or that church leadership overthrow that you've got going on in your mind. You might want to see how things turned out for this group. Verse 10. And that he has brought you near him and all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you. And would you seek the priesthood also? It's not good enough for you to carry the most holy items, but you've just got to be a priest. Verse 11, therefore, it is against the Lord that you and all your company have gathered together. What is Aaron that you grumble against him? First of all, I really appreciate this, the fact that just a handful of chapters ago in Numbers chapter 12, it was Aaron that was coming for the position of Moses. You do remember that, right? Not long ago, Aaron and Miriam were gunning for Moses' authority. And here's Moses, just a handful of chapters later, defending the guy. Yeah, it's his big brother, but still, it's a pretty major offense. But here's Moses defending the guy. Nope. This is the guy God picked. And we're going to stick with the guy God picked. It shows me, first of all, in a word, forgiveness in the heart of Moses. He was a good forgiver. You had to be to lead this group of 3 million whiners and complainers and rebellers. You had to be a good forgiver. He was. He was a good forgiver. And it shows me his incredible trust in the Lord. The Lord's ability to restore, the Lord's ability to forgive, the Lord's ability to do bigger and better things in the future, even after a major failure like that from Numbers chapter 12. Verse 12, and Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and they said, we will not come up. All right, first of all, real quick, I want to say, where's On? He was mentioned in verse 1. If you look through the rest of this chapter, there's no sight of On. He is not mentioned at all. The only thing I can figure is that he must have had an on-again, off-again relationship with these guys. And so for the moment, On is off doing something else. Maybe he's dropped this whole thing. Maybe he's repented. I don't know. But On is dropped from the story. And so Moses comes to these two, Dathan and Abiram, and he says, all right, we're going to do this little showcase, and we're going to see who the Lord picks. So I want you to come out in the morning with your censers burning. And they say, no way. We will not come up. Reading on in verse 13. Is it a small thing, Moses, that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey? Did you read that? This is absurd. They're referring to Egypt. And they're using the language that Moses received from the Lord and gave to them. Moses said that the promised land was a land flowing with milk and honey. But now as they're recounting in their memories the good times of Egypt, oh, it was so wonderful there. A land flowing with milk, a paradise. Oh, we just love being slaves there. Man, I miss the cracks on the back from the taskmaster whips. Such good times there in paradise, the land flowing with milk and honey, Egypt. And Moses, you wrecked that all for us. You ripped us out of there. You pulled us from our paradise. You promised us another paradise, and you didn't give it to us. These guys have really bad memories. Either that or they have gone mad from the desert sun. But listen, it goes on. You brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness. Now, that was not Moses' fault. Just a few chapters ago, this is what the whole nation was begging for. They preferred, rather than having to go into the paradise that the Lord had brought them to, they preferred rather to just die in the wilderness. But they're pinning that on Moses. Moses, we're going to die in the wilderness. We're not going to get to a promised land. We can't get back to the old promised land, the old paradise flowing with milk and honey. We can't get to the new one now. We've been locked out of that because of rebellion. We're going to die here in the desert. It's your fault, Moses. No, it is your fault. The nation collectively sought for that, and the Lord met their prayers and gave them what they were asking for. So you brought us to kill us in this wilderness, that you must also make yourself a prince over us. Again, not Moses' choice, God's pick. Verse 14, moreover, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of these men? This is a really strange accusation or statement against Moses. as if, yeah, this is the kind of person Moses is. He's a total stooge. He goes around poking people in the eyeballs. You figured it out. That's what he was planning. Are you going to put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. So they double down on this. We're not showing up for this showcase. Verse 15, and Moses was very angry and said to the Lord, do not respect their offering. This cracks me up. It's like, Lord, I just want to make sure we're on the same page here. These guys, they're bringing offerings tomorrow. Everyone but Aaron, bad guys. Lord, I just want to make sure you know we can't let them get away with this. And I'm sure the Lord was thinking, oh, wow, Moses, I'm so glad you pointed that out. I might have missed that. I'm glad you pointed that out. Yes, I'll make sure we don't respect that offering. Reading on, I have not taken one donkey from them. I have not used my position as leverage for selfish gain, and I have not harmed one of them. I have not abused my authority to hurt a single one of them in any kind of way. Verse 16, and Moses said to Korah, be present, you and all your company before the Lord, you and they and Aaron tomorrow. Verse 17, and let every one of you take his censer and put incense on it, and every one of you bring before the Lord his censer, 250 censers. Those would be the censers from the leaders of the nation. I don't know where they got all these censers, honest to goodness. Must have had them made up. 250 censers. You also, that would be Korah, and Aaron, each his censer. Verse 18, so every man took his censer and put fire in them and laid incense on them and stood at the entrance of the tent of meeting with Moses and Aaron. Verse 19, then Korah assembled all the congregation against them at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord appeared to all the congregation. I don't know what that might have looked like, but I do know it was a demonstrable experiencing of God's presence. It was noticeable, it was observable, and it was undoubtable. The Lord showed up. Verse 20, and the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, separate yourselves, verse 21, from among the congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. Moses and Aaron, get yourselves to a safe space, because it is about to get lit here. I am about to pour out my wrath on these rebellious people. Verse 22, and Moses and Aaron rejoiced and said, yes, Lord, get them. Now, is that what they did? They are so lucky that they had Moses, because I think if this was me, I would absolutely be going for the popcorn and the soda, and I would say, thank you, Lord, for wiping out this negative influence from the camp. Take every single one of them. But here's what Moses and Aaron do. Verse 22, they fell on their faces again. See, guy with the flat nose, serious. They fell on their faces again and said, O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and will you be angry with all the congregation? And I want to point out there that Moses is the kind of leader that is tuned in to the frequency of the nation. He is a shepherd that smells like sheep, and he absolutely knows what is going on here in the flock. He knows that this is not 254 people that want to take Aaron down. He knows that this is the selfish ambition of one guy. You just read it. Shall one guy sin, Lord, and you punish the whole nation for that one guy's sin? Moses, he has his thumb on this. He knows exactly what's taking place. He knows that Korah has inspired this whole thing, that this is the sin of Korah, and that the rest of them were deceived into this. So Moses, he will not intercede for Korah here, but he does intercede for all of the rest of them. That is Dathan, Abiram, On, if he's still there or if he's off again, whatever. The 250 leaders, Moses is interceding for every single one of them. And the Lord spoke to Moses, verse 23, saying, verse 24, we will pick up right there next week. Oh, I'm so sorry. Did you hear the collective gasp of disappointment? I know you wanted to get to the point, you wanted to get to the end of the story, but we will pick up right there next week, and we will continue out this chapter. We'll definitely finish the chapter. And the next chapter, chapter 17, which goes right along with this story, it's actually the conclusion of this story. And it's a very short chapter, so we may finish out chapter 16 and do chapter 17 as well next week. It's the story of Aaron's rod, and what does it do? It buds, it sprouts, it blossoms. And we'll talk about the typological implications of that next week, hopefully. Will you stand? Let's close in a word of prayer. Father God, we're so grateful that you have placed examples like this in the Scriptures. Tough examples, though they may be, difficult to read, though they may be, how good they are for our souls. In this chapter, you teach us about our rebellion against your callings, your giftings, your appointments, and your divine order within the kingdom. And I pray that our fellowship is well-warned and well-versed on this topic, and that it would be the last consideration in our mind to go contrary to your will for your church, for your people. I believe that's where our hearts are, and if it's not, if there's anyone in our congregation that doesn't feel that way, if there's anyone in our congregation that is filled with selfish ambition or jealousy, covetousness, for a position or for recognition, I ask that you would mercifully change their hearts, humble them before your mighty presence, soften them and mold them, Lord, to make them look more like you. Thank you, Jesus, for your word. Thank you for our little group here tonight. I pray your blessings over every single one of them. Be with them, guide them, use them, rescue them, protect them. Lord, whatever they need of you this week, be the I am. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen. And Lord, please help Pastor Barry Sr. with those 2 Easter messages that he's got coming up. God bless you. You're dismissed. Have a good night, Anchored Fellowship.